The barrier came down over Shibuya like a lid closing on a jar, and nobody inside heard it seal. That was the worst part. Nanami would think later. Not the screaming, not the collapsed platforms, not the smell of copper and ozone that hung under the station lights. It was the silence in the half-second after the barrier closed, when 800,000 people simultaneously understood that the exits didn't work anymore. Nanami Kento stood on the mezzanine above the KO line platform. Tai still nodded with the same precision it had every morning for 11 years, and watched a curse the size of a delivery truck fold a train car in half like it was made of paper. "Ratio," he said quietly, and stepped off the ledge. He didn't get to finish the technique. Something came down out of the sky first. It wasn't a domain expansion. Nanami would have felt the barrier of a domain snap into place, the specific pressure change that meant reality had been rewritten in a box around him. This was different. This was air being displaced, hard, the way it displaces around a falling star. Except stars don't announce themselves with a sound like a compressed detonation and an orange and blue blur that hit the curse's shoulder joint before Nanami's brain had finished processing that something was there at all. The curse's arm separated from its body in a spray of black ichor. It didn't have time to scream before the same blur reappeared under its jaw and drove upward, and the truck-sized mass of cursed energy simply stopped existing in any coherent shape. Nanami landed on the platform in a crouch, glasses miraculously still on his face, and looked up at the man standing in the wreckage. He was maybe 5'9", spiky black hair that defied every law of hair Nanami had ever privately catalogued, an orange gi with a strange kanji on the chest, blue undershirt, wristbands that looked hand-sewn. He was looking down at his own fist with an expression of mild, genuine surprise. "Huh," the man said. "That felt weird, kind of squishy." Nanami had catalogued a great number of things over a decade of jujutsu sorcery work. Special grade curses, domain expansions that rewrote the geometry of a city block, a boy who ate a demon's finger and didn't die. He had a working taxonomy for horror, for power, for the specific texture cursed energy left on the air when something dangerous was near. This man had none of that texture. Nanami couldn't feel a trace of cursed energy on him, not suppressed, not masked, simply absent, the way a photograph of fire gives off no heat. And yet he had just erased a mid-grade curse in under a second, with what looked, distressingly, like the effort of swatting a fly. "Who?" Nanami said, in the careful voice of a man recalculating every assumption he owned. "Are you?" The man turned, and the grin that broke across his face was so incongruous with the burning platform, the screaming in the distance, the black ichor cooling on the tile, that for a moment, Nanami wondered if he'd concussed himself falling. "I'm Goku," he said it the way you'd announce good weather. Then he looked around, really looked, taking in the ruined train, the flickering emergency lights, a distant column of smoke rising over what had been a shopping arcade, and the grin thinned into something more focused. "This isn't Earth. I mean, it feels like Earth. Gravity's the same, but something's wrong with the air here. It's got this weight to it, like it's thick with something." "Cursed energy," Nanami said, before he could stop himself, because some professional instinct in him still wanted an accurate report, even while his worldview restructured itself in real time. "You're not from this world." "Guess not." Goku said this with the equanimity of a man discussing a wrong turn on a road trip. "I was fighting Jiren, big purple guy, tournament of power, real pain to hit, and then there was this huge dome of black and red energy that just sort of opened up. Like a hole tore in the middle of the fight. I got pulled through before I could even brace." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Guess whatever that was, it dropped me here." Nanami filed the phrase dome of black and red energy under a very specific and very alarming heading. Malevolent Shrine, Sukuna's domain. He'd have to think later about the mechanics of a domain collision violent enough to tear a hole between entire cosmologies. Right now, there were more pressing variables. There are trapped civilians throughout this barrier, Nanami said, straightening his tie with the reflexive precision of a man imposing order on his own nervous system. Curses, and worse, converging on this station. I don't know what you are, or where you're from, but if you're capable of what I just watched, I would ask you to help me get people out alive. Goku's expression sobered in a way that made him look, briefly, much older than his easy manner suggested. People are actually trapped? Like, can't leave? Yes. Then yeah, obviously. He said it like the question itself was strange to ask. Show me where. 3 blocks east, Yuji Itadori was learning, again, that the worst part of fighting Mahito was never the fight itself. It was the seconds after, when Mahito's body reassembled from the ruin Yuji had just made of it, patchwork stitches crawling back together over pale skin, and that same unbearable grin came back exactly where it had been. You keep doing that, Mahito said, conversationally, dusting non-existent dirt off his shoulder. Like it's going to work eventually. I find that so human. The hope is almost the best part of you people. Almost. Shut up. Yuji's knuckles were split open, black blood, his own, running down his wrist. Sukuna's voice hadn't spoken in his head for the last several minutes, which somehow made things worse. It meant even the parasite living in his gut had decided this particular fight wasn't worth narrating. Nobara's hammer connected with a straw doll a half-second later, and somewhere off to the side, Mahito's clone shrieked and folded inward. A hit that should have mattered, that in any other fight would have mattered, except Mahito's idle transfiguration technique made every death temporary and every victory a rented one. You're going to run out of soul before I run out of shape, Mahito said, and lifted a hand almost lazily toward Yuji's chest. The hand never reached him. Something landed between them, not fell, landed, feet first, with a concussive crack of displaced air that blew Nobara's hair flat and sent a nearby curse corpse tumbling. Yuji looked up into the back of a spiky-haired stranger in an orange gi, standing exactly where Mahito's palm should have been driving into his sternum. Mahito's hand had, instead, connected with the stranger's forearm, and stopped, not slowed, not deflected with technique, or reinforced cursed energy the way Nanami's ratio would counter an attack. Stopped, the way a hand stops against a wall. Mahito's transfiguration idol technique, the thing that had turned 3 sorcerers into unrecognizable ruin over the last hour, simply had nothing to grip onto. No soul shape to warp, no cursed energy signature to violate. That tickled, the stranger said, sounding almost disappointed, and Mahito's grin, for the first time all night, faltered. What are you? Mahito breathed, and there was something new in his voice. Not fear exactly. Curses didn't fear the way humans did, but a recalibration, the sudden vertigo of a predator realizing the thing in front of it had never once appeared on any chart it owned. I'm about to ask you the same thing, Goku said, and his tone had dropped the pleasant curiosity of a minute ago into something flatter, more attentive. He glanced sideways, just once, at Yuji, split knuckles, exhausted stance, a kid who looked like he'd been fighting for hours and losing ground the whole time, and something in his face settled, the way it settled right before he stopped playing. You okay? Goku asked him. Yuji stared. Who are you? I'm Goku. I'll explain after. He rolled his shoulder once, and cursed energy, even the ambient trace of Mahito's own presence, seemed to simply have nowhere to land on him, like rain sliding off a waxed hood. This the guy giving you trouble? He can't die, Yuji said, half warning, half disbelief. He reshapes his own body, souls, cursed spirits. He can't be killed by force. That's not how his technique. Everyone says that about someone, Goku said, and cracked his neck, right up until they meet somebody who hits harder than their trick works. Mahito's grin came back, thinner now, more brittle at the edges, papering over something Yuji had genuinely never seen on the curse's face before. Uncertainty. You talk a lot for someone who has no idea what I am. That's fair, Goku admitted. I don't. So why don't you show me? Mahito lunged, hand outstretched, idle transfiguration blooming from his palm in a lattice of black cursed energy meant to unmake flesh and soul both. And Goku didn't dodge. He caught the wrist, mid-strike, with 2 fingers. The transfiguration technique detonated against Goku's skin with a sound like static discharge and simply failed. The cursed energy scattering off him in visible sparks, unable to find purchase on a soul shape it had no reference for. Mahito's face, genuinely, for the first time in the entire Shibuya Incident, showed something close to alarm. No cursed energy, Mahito said, more to himself than anyone. No cursed energy at all. That's not possible. Everything alive has. You talk a lot too, Goku said, almost gently, and drove a fist into Mahito's sternum with maybe 1/10 of the force he'd used on the curse at the station. Mahito's body didn't reassemble instantly this time. It took nearly 4 full seconds, an eternity, in curse terms, stitches crawling frantically back together across a wound that had blown a crater clean through his torso, black matter boiling and reforming in visible strain. When his face rebuilt itself last, the grin was gone entirely. I need to reassess, Mahito said, and there was no theater left in his voice at all, just a curse doing the cold arithmetic of a threat it had catastrophically underestimated. I'll be seeing you again, all of you. He didn't vanish with cursed technique. He simply ran, faster than Yuji had ever seen him move, and within 2 seconds was gone past the wreckage of a collapsed pharmacy and out of sight. Silence settled over the block. Somewhere in the distance, sirens that would never reach through the barrier kept wailing anyway, out of habit or hope. Nobara lowered her hammer slowly, chest heaving, staring at the stranger with an expression somewhere between relief and total bewilderment. Okay, she managed. So who exactly is Space Dad? Yuji, still catching his breath, found he didn't have a better question either. Goku turned back to them both, that easy grin returning like it had never left, utterly unbothered by having just done something that should have been physically impossible in this world's own internal logic. Sorry, I probably should have said hi first. I'm Goku. There a reason a whole city's sealed up like this. And why's everybody trying to kill you two specifically? It's a long story, Yuji said faintly. I've got time, Goku said, glancing up at the strange bruised sky pressing down over Shibuya like a held breath. Looks like none of us are going anywhere for a while. Across the barrier's inner edge, in a narrow alley choked with the smell of blood and scorched concrete, Megumi Fushiguro pressed a hand to a wound at his ribs and watched Sukuna's presence recede back into the dark well of his own gut. Satisfied for now, waiting. He'd felt it too. Everyone with even a trace of cursed energy sensitivity in the barrier had felt it. That eruption near the station, a spike of raw power with no cursed signature attached to it at all, like a hole had been punched clean through the world's usual rules. Whatever it was, it had been strong enough that even Sukuna, dormant and contemptuous, had gone briefly, uncharacteristically quiet. Interesting, Sukuna murmured, from somewhere behind Megumi's own eyes, in the low, amused register he used only for things that genuinely surprised him. It's been a very long time since anything in this world made me want to go looking for a fight instead of waiting for one to come to me. Megumi said nothing, but he filed the direction away all the same and started walking toward the smoke rising over the station, because whatever that presence was, it was already tangled up in the middle of everything Shibuya was about to become, and some instinct, colder and more precise than curiosity, told him it wasn't finished announcing itself yet. By the time Goku had heard the full shape of it, Gojo sealed in the prison realm, curses posing as first years, a death-painting massacre already scored into the ground floor of Shibuya Station, and a curse wearing a teenage boy's body somewhere in the wreckage, who might be the strongest thing this world had produced in 1,000 years. He'd gone quiet, in a way that made Nobara nervous. So the strongest guy on your side is stuck in a jar, he said slowly. and the guy who did it is walking around in one of your friend's bodies. That's the short version, Yuji said, and nobody's come to help you two specifically since this started. Not really, Nobara admitted. Nanami's around somewhere. Everyone else is either dead, fighting somewhere else in the barrier, or, she stopped, jaw tightening, or they're the reason we're fighting in the first place. Goku was quiet a moment longer, turning something over behind his eyes that looked less like anger and more like careful arithmetic. Then he rolled his neck once, the same gesture he'd made before hitting Mahito, and some of the boyish ease came back into his face, though it sat differently now, deliberate, like a man choosing to keep things light because the alternative wasn't useful yet. Okay, he said, well, I'm here now, and where I'm from, when something's this messed up, you don't wait around for someone else to fix it. He grinned at them both. Show me where the rest of the trouble is. They didn't get the chance to answer. The alley wall 30 feet down the block detonated outward in a gout of orange flame. Brick and rebar sent tumbling across the street, and out of the smoke stepped something that looked, at first glance, like a man made of volcanic rock. Cracks glowing molten orange across a hunched muscular frame, eyes burning like coals in a face that had never learned an expression softer than contempt. Jogo, Yuji breathed, shoving Nobara back a step on reflex. I felt it from the other side of the barrier. Jogo's voice came out with a low, grinding rasp, like stone shifting under pressure, and his burning gaze fixed past the two sorcerers entirely, landing on Goku with an intensity that made the air around him visibly shimmer with heat. Something without a single trace of cursed energy, just erased a special adjacent curse and put its hands on Mahito hard enough to make him run. Do you have any idea how long it's been since Mahito ran from anything? You're a special grade, Nobara said, backing further, hammer already coming up, though her voice had lost most of its earlier steadiness. You're supposed to be somewhere else. Why are you? Because Sukuna wants to know what this is, Jogo said, and cracks of fire licked wider up his forearms, and I intend to be the one who finds out. Goku stepped forward, easy and unhurried, putting himself between Jogo and the two teenagers without any visible sense of urgency at all, which somehow made it more unsettling than if he'd looked afraid. You're a lot bigger than the last guy, Goku observed, and you're on fire. That's new. He tilted his head, curious rather than wary. You gonna try to hit me too? I'm going to burn this entire block to bedrock, if that's what it takes to see what you're made of, Jogo said, and slammed both fists together. The domain expansion came down like a held breath finally released, reality folding inward, the alley and the street and the burning wreckage all sublimating into a hellscape of volcanic rock, cracked earth glowing beneath a black sky, magma rivers threading between jagged pillars of stone, coffin of the Iron Mountain. Guaranteed hit, guaranteed death for anything without a domain of its own to answer it. Yuji had seen this domain end lives before. He grabbed Nobara's arm on pure reflex, bracing for the barrier's crushing certainty to do what it always did. It didn't happen the way it was supposed to. Goku didn't have a domain. He had no curse technique to answer one, no counter-domain to invoke, none of the specific jujutsu grammar that made survival inside a domain expansion possible. By every rule Yuji had ever been taught, a domain expansion's guaranteed hit meant exactly that, guaranteed. There was no version of this where an outsider without cursed energy simply stood there and lived. Goku simply stood there and lived. The lava-forged blade Jogo's domain manifested, the certain hit technique baked into the barrier's structure, came down across Goku's shoulder and shattered against him like it had struck tempered steel, sparks scattering harmlessly into the volcanic air. Jogo's eyes, burning coal red, went wide with something that looked, for a special grade curse, almost like the birth of genuine fear. That's not. Jogo's voice cracked, briefly losing its grinding menace entirely. A domain's guaranteed hit doesn't just miss. That's not how it... I don't really know what a domain is, Goku admitted, glancing around at the volcanic landscape, with the mild interest of a man touring somewhere new. But if that was supposed to hurt, it needs some work. He crossed the distance between them, faster than Jogo's coal eyes could track, and the punch that followed didn't just knock Jogo backward, it tore straight through the domain expansion itself, the volcanic sky cracking like glass, the whole hellscape rupturing and dissolving back into the ruined Shibuya street around them in a spray of collapsing cursed energy. Jogo hit the far wall of a collapsed storefront hard enough to bring the remaining structure down on top of him in a roar of concrete and dust. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Jogo dragged himself up out of the rubble, half his face scorched black where it should have been glowing orange, breathing hard in a way Yuji had never once seen him do. The special grade curse, the thing that had personally raised a shopping district and matched Sukuna's own attention, looked, for the first time all night, like something that understood it might actually die here. "I need," Jogo said, voice unsteady, "to report this, now." He didn't run the way Mahito had. He burned, his whole body igniting into a column of flame that shot skyward and vanished over the ruined skyline, leaving behind only a scorch mark and the smell of ash. Nobara let out a breath she'd apparently been holding since the domain came down. A special grade fled. I've seen special grade curses do a lot of things. I have never once seen one run. He was scared, Yuji said slowly, staring at the spot where Jogo had vanished. Of him. He turned to look at Goku, who was checking his own shoulder with mild curiosity where the lava blade had struck, like a man checking whether a mosquito bite had actually broken skin. "That domain thing," Goku said, glancing back at them. "That was one of those special techniques you mentioned, right? Felt like it was supposed to be some kind of certain hit." "It is," Yuji said. Jogo's domain is a guaranteed kill against anything that doesn't have the specific counter for it. There's no dodging it. There's no blocking it. You're just supposed to die." "Huh." Goku considered this with the same faint puzzlement he'd shown at the station. "I mean, it hit me. It just wasn't very strong." He shrugged. "I've taken worse from Frieza's little brother, honestly." Neither Yuji nor Nobara had the faintest idea who that was, and both privately decided this was not the moment to ask. 3 kilometers away, in a windowless conference room lit by the sterile hum of emergency backup power, 4 of the Jujutsu higher-ups sat around a table strewn with cursed energy readouts that had, in the last 20 minutes, gone from alarming to simply incoherent. "Explain this to me again," said Gakuganji, the elder Zenin patriarch, tapping a gnarled finger against a chart that measured ambient cursed energy density across the barrier in real time. "Because either our instruments are malfunctioning, or something inside that barrier just registered 0 cursed energy while generating enough raw output to disrupt a special grade's domain expansion." "The instruments aren't malfunctioning," said a younger sorcerer at the monitoring station, voice tight. "We're seeing residual shockwave data consistent with a domain being physically ruptured from the outside. That doesn't happen. There's no recorded technique in the history of Jujutsu sorcery capable of tearing a domain expansion apart without invoking one of its own. Then we have an unknown, extremely dangerous variable inside an already catastrophic incident," said another voice, flat, precise, belonging to a woman near the head of the table whose name badge read only Gakuganji's aide. "Which means our priorities are unchanged. Contain the incident. Identify the variable. Classify it as an asset or a threat before it decides that question for us. And if it's neither," Gakuganji said, folding his hands, "if it simply doesn't care what we classify it as." Nobody at the table had an answer for that, which in its own way was an answer. "Send word to every remaining sorcerer inside the barrier," Gakuganji said finally, into the silence. "Whatever that thing is, I want eyes on it, before Sukuna finds it first. If the King of Curses reaches this variable, before we understand what we're dealing with, Shibuya will be the least of what we lose tonight." Deep in the ruin of a collapsed shopping arcade, in a pocket of stillness that the fighting throughout Shibuya seemed to bend carefully around without ever quite touching, Choso knelt beside the still forms of his two younger brothers, expression unreadable. He had felt the disturbance too. Everyone with a working cursed energy sense in the barrier had. But where Jogo had gone hunting and Mahito had gone to ground, Choso simply sat with it a while, turning the sensation over with the same wary patience he brought to everything since the day Kenjaku had first given him purpose and then, later, taken it away again in pieces. Something without cursed energy, he thought, strong enough to make Jogo run. In a lifetime built entirely around the logic of curses and vows and blood, that was not a variable he had a category for. And in his experience, the things the world had no category for were the things that ended up rewriting every rule underneath them before the night was through. He rose, quietly, and began walking toward the smoke over the station. Not to fight, not yet, but because some old, careful instinct told him that whatever came next in Shibuya, it would not be decided by the players already on the board. It would be decided by the one that had never belonged to this game at all. Nanami found them 20 minutes later, in the wreckage of what had once been a pedestrian overpass, and the sight that greeted him was one he would spend the rest of his life trying, and failing, to file into any category his professional experience had prepared him for. Itadori and Kugisaki were sitting on a slab of fallen concrete, drinking water from a vending machine Goku had apparently pried open with 2 fingers, while the stranger from the station, crouched nearby, examining a half-collapsed train car with the focused curiosity of a man inspecting an unusual rock formation. "Nanami-san," Yuji straightened at the sight of him, relief plain on his face. "You're okay. For a given value of okay." Nanami's gaze moved to Goku, cataloging him properly for the first time. The absence of cursed energy signature, the total absence of fatigue, despite what Yuji was already breathlessly recounting, had been 2 separate confrontations with credible threats. "I take it this is the reason half the sorcerers still standing in this barrier are currently searching for a man who erased a curse at Shibuya Station with his bare hand." "That'd be me," Goku said, straightening up and offering an easy wave. "Goku. Sorry about the confusion. Wasn't really planning on causing any trouble. I just don't like watching people get hurt when I could have stopped it." "He beat Jogo," Nobara put in, still faintly incredulous saying it out loud. "Made him run. A special grade curse." "Ran." Nanami absorbed this with the particular stillness of a man doing careful, silent math. He had built an entire career on the principle of proportionate response, knowing exactly how much force a situation required, and applying no more, no less. Every instinct he owned was telling him that the man in front of him operated on a completely different axis of that same principle. One where proportionate simply didn't apply because the ceiling on his output hadn't been located yet by anyone in this world. "I have questions," Nanami said. "Many of them. But we don't have the luxury of time to answer them properly right now. There are still civilians trapped throughout this barrier, and Sukuna himself has been active tonight in ways that suggest he is hunting, not merely reacting." He straightened his tie, a habit that had become almost a ritual over the last several hours. "I would ask, bluntly, where your priorities lie. Are you here to help contain this, or simply to observe until something interests you enough to intervene?" Goku considered the question with more seriousness than his easy manner had suggested he was capable of. "Where I come from," he said, "when something's wrong and people are getting hurt, you don't really need a reason beyond that to help. But if you're asking whether I'm gonna just wander off, no, not with kids like these 2 still in the middle of it." He nodded at Yuji and Nobara. "I want to understand what's going on here first, though. This Sukuna guy, he's the one who did this. The barrier, the killing. He's the one wearing the body of my student's friend," Nanami said, and something colder moved behind his usually unshakable composure. "The strongest curse recorded in the history of Jujutsu sorcery, currently walking freely through this barrier, because the one sorcerer capable of matching him has been sealed away by an enemy technique, and nobody's been able to touch him. Several extremely capable people have died attempting to, Nanami said flatly. The current strategy has been containment and evacuation, not confrontation. Sukuna does not lose fights. He ends them, usually before the other side realizes the fight has begun. Goku's expression didn't shift into bravado, which Nanami noted with something like grudging respect. No boasting, no dismissiveness, just a quiet, focused attention, the look of a man recalibrating towards something he intended to take seriously. I'd like to meet him, Goku said simply. That, Nanami said, may not be a decision you get to make. Word is already spreading of an unidentified variable inside this barrier capable of shattering a special grade domain. If Sukuna hasn't already gone looking for you, he will soon. He collects strong opponents the way other men collect grudges. As if summoned by the sentence itself, the air around them changed. It wasn't cursed energy in the way Nanami had learned to recognize it over a decade of professional experience. This was heavier, older, saturated with a malevolence that felt less like power and more like certainty, the specific weight of something that had never once doubted its own superiority and had, until tonight, never had reason to. Every sorcerer within several blocks would have felt their instincts scream the same single word: run. Nanami's hand went to his weapon on pure reflex. Yuji was on his feet instantly, face draining of color, the ancient dread of Sukuna's presence pressing down over the ruined overpass like a held breath about to break. Goku turned toward the source of it, unhurried, and for the first time all night, his casual ease sharpened into something quieter and far more focused, the look of a man who had just felt, for the first time in this world, something worth actually paying attention to. There he is, Goku said softly. Sukuna descended into the wreckage of the overpass with no urgency at all, four arms unfolding from Megumi's borrowed frame, the extra eyes across his face taking in the scene with an aristocratic, bottomless contempt. His gaze passed over Nanami, over Yuji and Nobara, dismissing each in turn as beneath his notice, before finally settling on Goku, and stopped there, for a long moment, in a silence that stretched taut enough to hear the distant crackle of fires still burning throughout Shibuya. So, Sukuna said at last, voice carrying the same cold amusement it always did, "You're the thing that made Jogo run home like a whipped dog. You must be Sukuna." Goku's tone was almost friendly, though something underneath it had gone very still. "Heard a lot about you tonight. None of it good." "I imagine not." Sukuna's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "It's been a very long time since anything in this era gave me pause before deciding how hard to hit it. You've managed that in under a minute, simply by existing." He rolled his shoulders, all four arms shifting, with a predator's unhurried patience. "I find I want to know exactly what you are, before I decide whether killing you will be interesting or merely brief." "Funny," Goku said. "I was thinking almost the exact same thing about you." Nanami's grip tightened on his weapon, every instinct screaming that whatever happened in the next several seconds would decide far more than just the fate of the people standing on this overpass. He'd seen Sukuna's power firsthand, a fraction of it, in passing, and it had been enough to nearly end him. He had no framework at all for what happened when that power met something the entire barrier's sensor network couldn't even properly measure. "Everyone get back," Nanami said quietly, already retreating himself, pulling Yuji and Nobara with him toward the shattered stairwell at the overpass's edge. "Whatever this becomes, it will not have room for us in it." Sukuna's four arms flexed once, cursed energy beginning to gather visibly around Megumi's borrowed frame in coiling black tendrils, the ground beneath his feet starting to crack from raw ambient pressure alone. "Domain expansion," Sukuna said, almost conversationally. "Seemed premature the last time I used it in this city. Let's see if it remains premature against you." Goku's stance shifted, subtle, barely perceptible, weight settling low and even, the easy grin fading into something calm and absolute. "Go ahead," He said, "I've had a domain used on me tonight already. Wasn't that impressive?" Something flickered behind Sukuna's 4 eyes. Not fear, not yet, but the first genuine flicker of interest Shibuya had seen from him all night. The recalibration of a predator who had just realized, for the first time in centuries, that he might actually be facing an unknown quantity worth respecting before he destroyed it. "Then let's find out," Sukuna said. "Which of us is wrong?" The air around them both began to shake. Malevolent Shrine did not so much appear as it arrived, the sky itself tearing open into a vast black and crimson dome, wooden beams and hanging entrails materializing across a horizon that no longer resembled Shibuya at all, replaced instead by an endless funeral hall stretched to the edges of perception, lit by the dull red glow of 1,000 paper lanterns that gave off no warmth at all. The domain's signature slaughter technique, an instant, inescapable dismemberment guaranteed against anything caught inside its barrier, hung over everything like the held breath before an axe fall. Nanami had seen this domain once before, from a distance, and it had cost sorcerers he respected their lives, without any of them managing so much as a counter technique. He dragged Yuji and Nobara back through the collapsing stairwell, putting 3 floors of concrete and rebar between them and the dome's edge, and even from there he could feel the domain's guaranteed hit pressure pressing against his own barrier certainty like water testing a dam. "He's not holding back," Yuji breathed, watching through a shattered window as the crimson dome swallowed the entire overpass. That's the full Malevolent Shrine, not the compressed version he used on Jogo's clone, the real one. "Then let's hope," Nanami said grimly, "that whatever that man is, turns out to be exactly as strong as he needs to be." Inside the dome, Goku stood in the center of an endless hall of hanging lanterns and dismembered banners, and felt, for the first time since arriving in this world, something that actually made the hair on his arms rise. This wasn't like Jogo's domain, a hostile landscape with a guaranteed hit mechanism bolted onto it, brute and simple. This was precise, malicious in a focused, surgical way, every inch of the space calibrated toward a single purpose, cutting anything inside it into pieces small enough that survival became a mathematical impossibility rather than merely an unlikely one. "This is new," Goku said, mostly to himself, feeling the domain's guaranteed slaughter technique press against him from every angle simultaneously. An omnidirectional promise of dismemberment, with no gap, no blind spot, no seam to slip through by conventional means. Kind of like being surrounded, except the surrounding is the whole world. "That's rather the point," Sukuna said, appearing across the hall with unhurried menace, all 4 arms spread. "Malevolent Shrine guarantees a hit against everything within its boundary, the instant the boundary closes. There is no dodging what I've already decided will happen to you. You died the moment I opened this domain. Everything since has simply been formality." "You keep saying stuff like that," Goku said, settling into a low stance. Cursed energy, or whatever this world's version of overwhelming malice actually was, pressing down on him from every direction at once. "Guaranteed this, certain that. Where I'm from, guaranteed usually just means somebody hasn't met me yet." Sukuna's dismemberment technique triggered. The domain didn't feel like an attack so much as an environmental law suddenly enforcing itself. 1,000 infinitesimal cuts converging on Goku's position from every conceivable angle simultaneously. Cursed energy, given the shape of a blade so total it didn't require aim. Nanami, watching from beyond the dome's edge with the specific dread of a man who had seen this technique end lives before, braced for the only outcome he'd ever known it to produce. The dome shuddered. Not from a hit landing, from something resisting. Goku hadn't dodged. There had been nowhere to dodge to. The entire domain's guaranteed strike converging on him from all sides in the same instant. Instead, in the fractional slice of time between the technique triggering and its completion, his cursed energy absent, entirely alien form of ki had simply hardened around him, an aura of raw blue-white energy flaring outward in every direction at once, meeting the guaranteed dismemberment technique not with evasion, but with sheer, immovable resistance. The cuts landed and found nothing to cut. Sukuna's 4 eyes widened, the first true unguarded shock the King of Curses had shown in this incident, perhaps in centuries. That is not possible. Guaranteed means guaranteed. There is no defense against. There's always a defense, Goku said, breathing slightly harder now, the aura around him crackling with barely restrained power. You just gotta be strong enough that guaranteed stops meaning what the other guy thinks it means. He straightened, testing his own limbs, finding them intact. That's the strongest thing you've got? Something in Sukuna's expression shifted, the contemptuous amusement of the last several hours curdling, for the first time, into something closer to genuine, focused fury. Being wrong was not an experience the King of Curses had budgeted for tonight. No, Sukuna said, voice dropping into something low and dangerous. It is decidedly not. He raised a hand, and the air around his fingers began condensing into something white-hot and impossibly compressed. Cursed energy given the shape of pure destructive intent, gathering into the technique that had, in the space of a single exchange earlier in the barrier, killed a sorcerer Nanami had personally trained. Domain amplification, Sukuna said, and the crimson dome around them pulsed, doubling down on itself. And fire arrow. The lance of condensed cursed energy that followed didn't move like a projectile so much as arrive, closing the distance in a fraction of an instant, carrying enough raw destructive force behind it that the domain itself seemed to strain from proximity to its own weapon. Goku's hand came up. He caught it. Not deflected. Caught. Bare palm closing around a technique that should have punched clean through a mountain, the impact detonating outward in a shockwave that finally cracked visible fault lines through Malevolent Shrine's crimson sky. Lantern light flickering as the domain's fabric strained under the pressure of a collision it had never been designed to survive. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Goku's palm smoked faintly where the fire arrow had struck, cursed energy scattering off his aura in dissipating sparks. Sukuna stared at his own outstretched hand, at the arrow that hadn't found its mark, at the domain shuddering around them both, with an expression that, on a face capable of 1,000 years of contempt, looked almost unfamiliar, wearing something like doubt. "You're strong," Goku said, and there was no mockery in it at all, just the flat, honest assessment of a man who genuinely respected what he was fighting. Genuinely. Stronger than almost everything I've hit tonight put together. But I don't think you've actually fought anyone on my level before. Not once. Careful, Sukuna said, low and cold, the fury banked back down into something colder and more calculating. Call it doubt if you like, but doubt is not the same thing as losing. I have unraveled kingdoms with less provocation than this. Whatever you are, you have earned my full attention. That has never once gone well for anyone in 1,000 years. Good, Goku said, and the ground beneath both of them began to crack from the sheer pressure gathering around his frame, blue-white light bleeding brighter across his skin, hair beginning to lift and shimmer with the first edges of a transformation this world had never once had reason to prepare for. Because I haven't shown you anything yet either. Beyond the dome's crimson boundary, Nanami watched the fault lines spreading visibly across Malevolent Shrine's sky and felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since the culling game's opening hours, the faint, dangerous shape of hope. He's holding, Yuji breathed, disbelief plain in his voice. Nanami-san, he's actually, the domain's guaranteed hit failed. Nobody's ever. No, Nanami agreed quietly, watching the light building inside the dome with the specific unease of a man who suspected they had all just badly underestimated how much further this fight had left to escalate. Nobody has. Somewhere behind them, moving quiet and unhurried through the wreckage toward the same crimson light drawing every remaining sorcerer's attention, in Shibuya, Choso and Megumi, both felt the domain's fabric straining under a weight neither of them had a framework for. and understood, each in their own way, that whatever answer Shibuya found tonight would not be one any of them had written the rules for. The light building inside Malevolent Shrine had stopped looking like cursed energy several seconds ago. It had started looking, to the handful of sorcerers watching from beyond the dome's fracturing boundary, like the birth of something the barrier's own sensors had no register for at all. A blue-white glow climbing off Goku's frame in slow, rolling waves, his hair beginning to lift and pale, silver bleeding in at the roots. "What is that?" Yuji said, voice hushed, watching through a crack in the dome's crimson wall where the fabric had begun visibly tearing at the seams. "That's not... Is that a technique? Is that cursed energy at all?" "No," Nanami said, and for the first time all night, his composed voice carried something close to genuine awe. "Whatever that is, it isn't ours." Inside the dome, Sukuna watched the transformation complete itself with the stillness of a predator, recalculating an equation for the second time in one evening. All four arms tensed, every one of his 1,000 years of accumulated contempt narrowing down into something colder and far more attentive. The figure standing across from him now bore Goku's face, but the ease was gone from it entirely. Silver hair, silver eyes, a stillness to his stance that felt less like readiness and more like a held breath the size of a mountain. "Ultra instinct," Goku said quietly, in answer to a question nobody had asked aloud. "I don't use this unless I mean it." "Then I take it," Sukuna said, voice low. "You finally mean it. You've earned it," Goku said, genuinely. "Nobody in this world's made me pull this out tonight before you." Sukuna moved first, all four arms lashing out in a compound strike layered with cleaving cursed energy, dense enough to have ended the fight against nearly anyone else on the first exchange. A lattice of simultaneous attacks aimed at throat, spine, both hips, an attack pattern built specifically to eliminate the possibility of a clean dodge. Goku wasn't there when it landed. He wasn't dodging in the way Sukuna's centuries of combat experience understood dodging. No telegraphed motion, no visible decision, simply an absence where a body had been a half-second earlier and a presence somewhere else entirely, already inside Sukuna's guard. Movement so economical, it read less like evasion and more like the attack itself had simply failed to have ever been aimed correctly in the first place. The counterstrike that followed caught Sukuna across the ribs hard enough to crack Malevolent Shrine's crimson sky clean through, an entire quadrant of the domain's fabric shattering outward into raw, uncontained cursed energy that dissipated into the Shibuya night beyond like startled birds. Sukuna skidded backward through his own collapsing domain, catching himself mid-air with a flare of cursed energy, and for the first time all night, for perhaps the first time in a millennium, something that might genuinely have been called concern crossed his face. "You're not even trying to hit me," he said slowly. "You're simply reacting to whatever I do before I've finished deciding to do it." "That's the idea," Goku said. "It's not about being faster. It's about not needing to think at all. The body just knows." "That is an obscenity," Sukuna said, and there was real heat behind it now, something ancient and furious finally rising fully to the surface. A technique should require understanding, mastery, not simply existing beyond the need for it. "Maybe," Goku said, "or maybe you've just never had to fight anyone who didn't need to master anything to be strong enough." Sukuna's domain, already cracking along a dozen fault lines, began actively unraveling around them both. The crimson sky peeling back in sheets, hanging lanterns guttering out one by one, the endless funeral hall folding in on itself as the sheer disparity in the fight destabilized the technique's own structural integrity. Malevolent Shrine had never been built to survive an opponent capable of damaging it faster than Sukuna's own cursed energy could reinforce it. "Enough," Sukuna said, and all four arms flared with condensed cursed energy simultaneously, gathering into a single overwhelming technique. Not a domain this time, but raw output, centuries of accumulated power compressed into one final, absolute strike, meant to end the exchange through sheer, undeniable magnitude rather than technique. If precision won't touch you, let's see what raw annihilation accomplishes. The attack that followed tore the remaining fabric of Malevolent Shrine apart entirely, crimson sky shattering into falling embers of dissipating cursed energy, the funeral hall dissolving back into the burnt husk of Shibuya's overpass as the domain structure finally gave out completely under its own creator's desperation, and at the center of it, a single compressed lance of cursed energy vast enough to have leveled a city block bore down on Goku with the full, unrestrained weight of 1,000 years behind it. Goku met it with one hand. The collision detonated with a shockwave that finally, audibly, reached every remaining sorcerer in the barrier. A concussive boom that rattled windows 3 kilometers away, a flash of blue-white light, bright enough to briefly outshine every fire still burning in Shibuya. When it cleared, Sukuna's overwhelming strike had simply ceased to exist, absorbed and dispersed against a palm that hadn't so much as scorched. Sukuna stood in the wreckage of his own unraveled domain, breathing hard for what might have been the first time in his existence. All 4 arms lowered, Megumi's borrowed body bearing the visible strain of cursed energy pushed past any threshold it had known before. "I could keep pressing," Goku said quietly, standing steady in the settling dust, Ultra Instinct's silver glow easing back down into something calmer. "But I don't think that's what tonight actually needs. You're not trying to protect anyone here. You're just testing how far you can go before something finally stops you." "And has something," Sukuna said, low, guarded, "stopped me tonight?" "Yeah," Goku said. "I'm not gonna kill you. That's not really why I came into this. But I'm not gonna let you keep doing whatever this is to people who can't fight back either. So however this usually goes for you, it doesn't go that way tonight." Sukuna studied him for a long moment, the closest thing to genuine consideration the King of Curses had likely given anyone in centuries. And then, unexpectedly, something that might almost have been respect flickered behind his 4 eyes. "1,000 years, Sukuna said, "and the first thing to genuinely halt me arrives from somewhere that isn't even this world at all." He rolled Megumi's shoulders once, cursed energy retreating back into a coiled, banked stillness. "Very well. Tonight, I yield the field. Not out of fear, out of curiosity as to whether this was a singular fluke, or the first sign that this world's ceiling has finally been proven lower than I assumed." His gaze sharpened, promise threaded through the words. "We will finish this. Somewhere, sometime, when it suits me. Savor the reprieve." He vanished back into Megumi's own consciousness without further ceremony, the oppressive weight of his presence lifting off the ruined overpass all at once, like a held breath finally released across the entirety of Shibuya. Megumi staggered, catching himself against a fallen support beam, gasping as control of his own body returned to him all at once. He looked up, dazed, at the silver-haired stranger standing amid the wreckage of a domain that should have killed him several times over, and had absolutely no idea what to say. "You okay?" Goku asked, already easing back toward his ordinary black-haired form, the immense pressure of Ultra Instinct receding like a tide going out. Megumi swallowed. "I don't know what just happened. Any of it." "Yeah," Goku said, with a tired, genuine grin. "Join the club." Nanami reached them minutes later, Yuji and Nobara close behind, picking their way through the wreckage of an overpass that no longer resembled anything but a battlefield. Sirens still wailed uselessly beyond the barrier. Smoke still rose over a dozen fires throughout Shibuya. But for the first time in hours, the air itself felt different. Lighter, somehow, in a way none of them could quite articulate. "He's gone," Megumi said, before anyone could ask. "Sukuna, he just left. Said he'd finish it later." "That's Sukuna's version of losing," Nanami said, studying Goku with an expression caught somewhere between profound relief and the specific unease of a man who understood that whatever had just happened had permanently rewritten his understanding of what this world's ceiling actually was. "I don't believe he's ever willingly withdrawn from a fight in recorded history." "He will be back," Goku said, quiet and honest. "Guys like him always come back once, hoping the first time was a fluke. But that's a problem for later. He looked around at the four of them, exhausted, bloodied, alive, and some of his old easy grin returned. Right now, there's still a whole city full of people trapped in here who need help getting out. That seems like the more important thing. Nanami found, for possibly the first time all night, that he had nothing to argue with in that assessment at all. The barrier over Shibuya held for hours after that, but it no longer felt the way it had before. The dread that had hung over the city like a held breath had, somewhere in the wreckage of a shattered domain, quietly broken. Sorcerers still worked through the night, pulling survivors from collapsed stations and burning arcades, but they worked with the strange, cautious relief of people who had watched something they didn't understand, hold a line nobody else could, and hadn't fully processed yet what that meant for tomorrow. Nanami never did get all his questions answered. Not about Ultra Instinct, not about the tournament Goku had been pulled from mid-fight, not about a home that felt, by his own admission, a universe away and unreachable for now. But he'd stopped needing every answer to trust what he'd witnessed. Some things you simply took on faith, once you'd seen them hold against Malevolent Shrine, and still ask, afterward, if everyone else was okay. Sukuna's promise lingered over all of them like a held debt. We will finish this, and none of them doubted he meant it. But for one night, in a city sealed off from the rest of the world, something impossible had walked in from a universe with no cursed energy at all, and simply refused to let anyone else keep dying. That, in the end, was enough to be going on with.